I'll take all of you. Those 4 words changed everything. A burned-out mother, 3 starving children, a stranger who saw past their broken pieces and offered what nobody else would, a chance. But safety on the Wyoming frontier comes with a price, and when the ghosts of Marion Hale's past ride in with loaded guns, she'll have to choose between running again or finally standing her ground. This is a story about courage found in ashes, family built from strangers, and one rancher's promise that refused to break. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The dawn came up blood red over the Wyoming plains, painting the empty sky in shades of warning. Marion Hale didn't notice. She'd stopped looking at beautiful things 3 days ago when the fire took everything else. Her feet moved because stopping meant dying. Simple as that. One boot in front of the other, the leather cracked and stained with something she refused to think about. Her dress, once blue, once clean, once worn to Sunday church, hung in tatters around her legs, the hem black with ash and prairie dust. Her left arm throbbed where a raider's hand had seized her, finger-shaped bruises blooming purple against her pale skin. Behind her, 3 shadows moved in silence. Theo walked closest, his 10-year-old shoulders squared like a man's, his jaw set in that terrible way children learn when they've seen too much too soon. He carried June on his back, her small arms wrapped tight around his neck, her face buried against his shoulder. The 4-year-old hadn't spoken since the night of the fire, hadn't cried, hadn't made a sound. Between them stumbled Penny, 7 years old with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. She clutched a burned rag doll to her chest, the only thing she'd managed to grab before Theo pulled her from the house. Her eyes were ancient, haunted by things no child should remember. They'd been walking for 3 days. 3 days since the raiders came in the night, whooping and hollering like demons straight from hell. 3 days since Marion woke to smoke and screaming, to the sound of her husband James being dragged from their bed, his shouts cut short by the sickening crack of a rifle butt against his skull. 3 days since she gathered her babies and ran while their home burned behind them, the flames reaching up to swallow the stars. The town appeared like a mirage through the heat shimmer, a scattered collection of weathered buildings clinging to existence in the middle of nowhere. Salvation, or just another place to die? Marion didn't much care anymore. Her children needed water. That was the beginning and end of her thinking now. The general store squatted on the main street, its false front faded by sun and wind. A hand-painted sign read Hutchins Mercantile in letters that had once been proud. Marion pushed through the door, and the bell above jangled, too loud, too cheerful. The man behind the counter startled, his eyes going wide. Marion knew what he saw, a half-dead woman with wild eyes and wilder hair, children hanging off her like ghosts. She must look like something from a nightmare. "Please," she said, and her voice cracked from disuse. "Water, just water. I can work for it. I can—" "Jesus Christ," the shopkeeper breathed. He was middle-aged, soft around the middle, with the kind face of someone who'd never had to kill anything bigger than a chicken. "Ma'am, you just sit down. I'll get—" The door opened behind her. Marion spun, putting herself between her children and whoever had just walked in, her body moving on instinct. Her hands came up, ready to claw, to bite, to fight with whatever she had left. But the man in the doorway wasn't a raider. He was tall, built like he'd been carved from the same hard rock as the mountains in the distance. Dust covered him head to toe, turning his dark hair gray, but beneath it Marion could see a face weathered by sun and something deeper, grief maybe, or the kind of loneliness that settles into a man's bones. His eyes were gray-blue, the color of storm clouds, and they moved over her and the children with an expression she couldn't read. He wore cattleman's clothes, sturdy and worn, a gun belt slung low on his hips. His boots were scarred from hard use, his hands large and calloused. Everything about him spoke of a man who survived because he was tougher than whatever tried to kill him. "Gavin," the shopkeeper said, relief flooding his voice. "Thank God. This lady and her children just came in. They need—" But Gavin wasn't looking at the shopkeeper. He was looking at Theo, at Penny, at little June still clinging to her brother's back. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the stubble on his cheek. Then his eyes found Marion's, and something passed between them. a recognition that had nothing to do with having met before and everything to do with understanding what it looked like when someone had stared into the abyss. "Are these all your children?" he asked, his voice low and rough, like gravel under wagon wheels. Marion's throat closed. She managed a nod. She waited for what always came next, the assessment, the judgment, the calculation of whether helping was worth the trouble. 3 kids meant 3 mouths to feed, 3 bodies to shelter. Most men did the math and walked away. Gavin's expression shifted, hardening into something that looked almost like resolve, like a decision made. "Good," he said. "Then I'll take all of you." The world seemed to stop. Marion stared at him, certain she'd misheard, certain the exhaustion had finally driven her mad. "What?" "My ranch is 10 miles west of here," Gavin said, speaking to her like he was discussing the weather, like he hadn't just offered to take on a stranger and 3 children without knowing a damn thing about them. "You look like you could use a hot meal and a place to rest. I've got both." "I don't—" Marion's thoughts scattered. "I can't pay you. I don't have anything. We lost everything in the—" "Didn't ask for payment." Gavin turned to the shopkeeper. "Tom, load up some supplies, beans, flour, coffee, whatever fresh vegetables you've got. Put it on my account." Now, Gavin," Tom said carefully, "I'm not saying you shouldn't help these folks, but you sure you want to take on—" "I'm sure." Gavin's tone left no room for argument. He looked back at Marion, and his expression softened just slightly. "You don't have to say yes, but the offer stands. A roof, food, work, if you want it. No strings." "Why?" The word burst out of Marion before she could stop it. "Why would you do this? You don't know us. We could be—" She couldn't finish the sentence. What could they possibly be that would threaten a man like this? Gavin was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice was softer. "Let's just say I know what it looks like when someone's got nowhere else to go. And I've got space nobody's using." Theo shifted behind Marion, and she heard him whisper, "Mama?" She turned to look at her son, saw the exhaustion in his young face, the way he was swaying on his feet even as he held his baby sister. Saw Penny's hollow eyes, June's too still silence. They were at the end of their rope, and the rope was fraying. She thought of James, wherever he was, dead or taken, she didn't know which was worse. She thought of the 3 days they'd walked, how Theo had shared his portions with his sisters, how Penny had stopped asking when they could rest. She thought of what would happen if she said no, if she walked back out into that merciless sun with no destination and no hope. Sometimes survival wasn't brave. Sometimes it was just accepting the hand that reached out before you drowned. "Okay," Marion whispered. "Okay." Bond. The wagon ride to Gavin's ranch took 2 hours, and Marion spent every minute of it waiting for the trap to spring. She'd seen it before, in the months after the war ended and the world went mean. Men who offered help and then expected payment in the worst kind of ways. Men who smiled with friendly faces and had monster thoughts behind their eyes. She kept herself between Gavin and her children, her body tense, ready to throw herself over them at the first sign of trouble. But Gavin just drove the wagon in silence, his attention on the rutted road ahead. The only time he spoke was to point out a hawk circling overhead, to tell Theo the names of the mountains in the distance, to hand Penny a canteen without her having to ask. The children drank like they'd been crawling through desert. Marion made them go slow, knowing too much water too fast would make them sick, but it broke her heart to ration even this small mercy. The landscape around them was harsh, but beautiful in its own way. Rolling plains dotted with sagebrush, the sky so huge it made Marion feel insignificant. She'd grown up in Ohio, where trees blocked out the heavens, and towns huddled together like they were afraid of open space. This was different. This was a place where you could see danger coming from miles away. Or where danger could see you. "What happened?" Gavin asked quietly, pitched low so the children wouldn't hear. Marion's first instinct was to lie, to smile and say nothing more than bad luck and hard times, but she was so tired of carrying it all alone. "Raiders," she said, matching his volume. "Came through about a week ago. They'd been hitting farms and homesteads all up the valley. We thought we were too small to bother with. Just a little place, barely enough to feed ourselves." She paused, the memories pressing against her throat like hands. Gavin didn't push, just kept his eyes on the road, giving her space to find the words. They came at night, burned us out. My husband tried to fight them. She stopped, breathed through the pain. They took him. I don't know if he's alive. I'm sorry, Gavin said, and the simple sincerity in those 2 words nearly broke her. We walked for 3 days, Marion continued, needing suddenly to say it all, to put the weight of it somewhere besides her own chest. I kept thinking someone would help. We passed other farms, other people. Everyone shut their doors. Everyone turned away. People get scared, Gavin said. Scared makes folks selfish. But not you. Marion heard the challenge in her voice and didn't care. You're not scared of taking on a widow and 3 children? Of whatever trouble might follow us? Gavin was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I spent 3 years watching men die for nothing in a war that didn't change a damn thing except who got to suffer. Came home to an empty house and fields that didn't know the difference between a good man and a dead one. Spent 10 years building something just to live alone in the middle of it. He glanced at her, something raw and honest in his expression. Maybe I'm done being scared of the wrong things. Marion didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what to do with a man who spoke about loneliness like it was a fact and not a shame. They crested a rise, and Gavin pulled the horses to a stop. There, he said, pointing. Below them, nestled in a valley where a creek cut silver through the grass, sat a homestead. The main house was low and sturdy, built from logs weathered to gray. A barn stood behind it, roof slightly sagging but solid. There was a chicken coop, a well with a stone surround, fences marking out pasture where a handful of cattle grazed. It wasn't much, not rich, not fancy, but it was real. It existed. It endured. Home, Gavin said simply. And something in Marion's chest, something that had been clenched tight since the night of the fire, loosened just slightly. The house smelled like dust and old smoke, and a man living alone too long. But it was clean enough, floors swept, dishes washed and stacked, bed made with military corners. Gavin showed them inside with an awkwardness that might have been endearing if Marion had any energy left for finding things endearing. It's not much, he said, stating the obvious. 2 bedrooms. You and the girls can take mine. I'll bunk with the boy in the spare room. We can't take your bed, Marion protested. You can, and you will. Gavin's tone brooked no argument. I've slept on worse than a spare bunk. He moved through the kitchen, stirring up the coals in the stove, setting water to boil. His movements were efficient, practiced. A man used to doing for himself. The children stood clustered near the door like birds ready to fly, not quite believing this was real. Marion wanted to tell them it would be okay, but she'd learned not to make promises she couldn't keep. There's a creek out back, Gavin said, addressing Theo directly. Water's cold but clean. You want to help your sisters wash up while I get food started? Theo looked at his mother. Marion nodded. The boy was so desperate to be brave, to be the man of the family now that James was gone. It hurt to see it. I can do that, Theo said, his voice cracking only slightly. Good man! Gavin handed him a bar of soap and some towels. Don't go past the fence line and holler if you see anything bigger than a rabbit. After the children filed out, moving as a unit the way they'd learned to do, Marion stood alone in the kitchen with this stranger who'd taken them in. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know where to begin. Sit down before you fall down, Gavin said, not looking at her as he sliced bacon into a pan. I should help. You should sit. Marion's legs made the decision for her, buckling until she found herself in a chair at the rough wooden table. Now that she'd stopped moving, the exhaustion hit like a physical blow. Every muscle screamed, her feet throbbed. The bruises on her arm pulsed with her heartbeat. Gavin worked in silence, and Marion watched him through half-closed eyes. He moved with the economy of someone who'd learned to do everything himself. No wasted motion, no fuss. The bacon sizzled. Eggs cracked into the pan. Coffee perked on the back of the stove, filling the air with a smell that reminded Marion of better times. How long have you been alone out here? She asked before she could think better of it. 10 years, give or take. No wife? Had one. She died. The flatness in his voice said that was the end of that conversation. Marion recognized the tone, the sound of grief so old it had turned to stone. She knew better than to poke at it. I'm sorry, she said. It was a long time ago. He plated up food, more food than Marion had seen in weeks. Eggs, bacon, fried potatoes, thick slices of bread with butter. Her stomach cramped at the sight of it. Children should be back soon, Gavin said. We'll eat together. And they did. Theo, Penny, and June came in pink-faced from cold water and scrubbing, looking more human than they had in days. They sat at the table with wide eyes, staring at the food like they'd forgotten such abundance existed. Go on, Gavin said gently. It's yours. Penny burst into tears. It was so unexpected that everyone froze. The little girl just sat there, sobbing, her thin shoulders shaking. Marion reached for her, but Penny shook her head, gulping air. I'm sorry, she gasped. I'm sorry. I don't know why. It's okay to cry, Gavin said quietly. He didn't move toward her, didn't crowd her, just spoke low and steady. You've been holding a lot. Sometimes you got to let it out. And somehow that made it safe. Penny cried, and then Theo started crying too. Harder, angrier, the tears of a boy trying to be a man and failing. June stayed silent on her mother's lap, but her small body trembled. Marion held her children while they broke apart, and she looked at Gavin across the table. He met her eyes with an expression she couldn't name, not pity, but something like understanding, like he knew what it was to carry weight until it crushed you, and then to finally put it down. Eat when you're ready, he said. Food'll keep warm. That first night Marion barely slept. The bed was soft, too soft after 3 nights on hard ground. The sheets smelled like lye soap and sun, clean and foreign. Through the thin walls she could hear her children breathing in exhausted sleep, all 3 of them piled together in the bed Gavin had given up without question. She kept waiting for something bad to happen, for the door to open, for hands to reach, for the price of safety to be demanded. But the house stayed quiet, except for the settling of old wood and the distant sound of cattle lowing in the dark. In the spare room across the house, she heard Gavin moving occasionally. Restless sleeper, maybe. Or maybe he was having the same trouble believing this was real. When dawn broke gray and cold, Marion gave up on sleep and slipped out of the bedroom in her borrowed nightgown, one of Gavin's shirts, clean and worn soft. The kitchen was empty, the stove cold. She built up the fire, moving quietly, finding her way around an unfamiliar space through sheer practiced need. Coffee first, then bread dough, because she'd seen flour in the pantry and her hands knew how to turn it into something useful. She worked without thinking, muscle memory taking over, knead, fold, let rise. The familiar rhythm settled something in her chest. She didn't hear Gavin come in until he spoke. You didn't have to do that. Marion jumped, spinning to find him in the doorway. He looked rumpled, half awake, his hair sticking up in the back. Without the dust coating him, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought. Mid-30s, maybe, with lines around his eyes from squinting into sun. I wanted to, Marion said. I need to do something, to earn this. You don't owe me anything. Then let me do this because I want to. She heard the edge in her voice and softened it. Please. I'm not good at sitting still. Gavin studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. Coffee ready? Almost. They moved around each other in the kitchen's small space, that awkward dance of 2 people learning each other's rhythms. Gavin grabbed cups. Marion poured coffee. He took his black. She added sugar because it was there and had been a luxury for so long. What needs doing today? She asked. Ranch work, fences to mend, cattle to check, nothing you need to worry about. Can Theo help you? He's been... Marion paused, searching for words. He needs to feel useful, to feel like a man. Understanding flickered across Gavin's face. I could use an extra set of hands, if he's up for it. He'll be up for it. They drank coffee in silence as the sun rose, painting the kitchen in gold. Outside, the world was waking up, birds calling, cattle stirring, the creek rushing over stones. It was peaceful in a way that made Marion's chest ache. This is a good place, she said quietly. It survived worse than me, Gavin replied. That's about the best you can say for any place out here. The children woke in stages. Theo first, alert and wary, then Penny, then June, still silent as a ghost. They ate breakfast together, real food on real plates, and Marion watched some color come back into her baby's faces. After, Gavin took Theo outside, and Marion could see them through the window. The man showing the boy how to check the fences, how to read tracks in the dust, how to move among the cattle without spooking them. Theo drank it in like water after drought. Inside, Penny found her voice again in small measures. She hummed while helping Marion wash dishes, asked questions about the chickens, wondered out loud if they could stay here. "I don't know, baby," Marion said honestly. "We'll see." "I like it here," Penny whispered. "It doesn't feel scary." Marion pulled her daughter close, pressed a kiss to her dark hair. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Peace. The days fell into a rhythm that felt almost like normalcy. Gavin worked the ranch from sunup to sundown, and Theo shadowed him like a devoted ghost. The boy learned quickly how to mend leather, how to rope a calf, how to read weather in the clouds. He came in each night exhausted and proud, dirt under his fingernails and new muscles forming in his thin arms. Marion took over the house without being asked, cooking, cleaning, mending the holes in Gavin's clothes that he'd been ignoring for God knew how long. She found a rhythm in the work, a purpose that didn't involve just surviving minute to minute. The kitchen became hers. The garden plot behind the house became hers. The small rituals of domestic life became hers again. Penny bloomed like a flower in good soil. She sang while feeding chickens, talked to the cattle like they were friends, spent hours by the creek collecting smooth stones and arranging them in patterns only she understood. The haunted look began to fade from her eyes. Only June stayed silent. The little girl followed Marion like a shadow, her hand always reaching for her mother's skirt. She didn't speak, didn't cry, just watched the world with those ancient eyes. Marion worried, but Gavin said to give her time. "Seen it in the war," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch after the children had gone to bed. Men who stopped talking after seeing things they couldn't unsee. They came back to themselves eventually, or they didn't, but pushing didn't help. "She used to talk non-stop," Marion said, her voice breaking slightly. "Used to chatter about everything and nothing. Now it's like she's locked inside herself. She saw her whole world burn down. That'd silence anyone." Marion knew he was right, but it didn't make it hurt less. They'd fallen into a habit, these evening talks. After the work was done and the children were sleeping, Marion and Gavin would sit on the porch with coffee and watch the sun set over the plains. They didn't talk much. Neither of them were much for small talk, but the silence was comfortable. Bit by bit, Marion learned his story. He'd fought in the war, same as most men his age. Came home to find his young wife dead of fever, the farm gone to hell, everything he'd left behind turned to dust. Rebuilt it alone because there was nothing else to do. Lived here for a decade with only cattle and ghosts for company. "Don't you get lonely?" Marion asked one night. "Got used to it, I guess. Got to where I didn't know any other way to be." He was quiet for a moment. "But yeah, sometimes the quiet gets loud." Marion understood that. She'd felt it in the weeks after the fire, walking across empty land with her silent children. The world could be so big and so empty all at once. "Why did you help us?" she asked. "Really?" Gavin took his time answering, rolling the question around like he was searching for truth in it. "My wife—" He stopped, started again. "Sarah. She used to say that the measure of a man wasn't in what he kept for himself, but in what he gave away when he had nothing to spare." He looked at Marion, his expression unreadable in the twilight. "I stopped measuring myself by much of anything after she died. But when I saw you and those kids in town, looking like you'd walked through hell, I don't know. Something in me said, here's a chance to be worth something again." "You're worth something," Marion said fiercely. "Don't think you're not." "Maybe." He smiled slightly, a ghost of the expression. "Or maybe we're both just trying to figure out how to keep living when everything says we should have laid down and quit." Marion couldn't argue with that. Dick. 3 weeks in, something changed. Marion woke before dawn as usual, slipped into the kitchen to start coffee and bread. But when she looked out the window, she saw a figure standing by the barn. Not Gavin, someone else. Someone who didn't belong. Her blood went ice cold. She grabbed the shotgun Gavin kept by the door and moved onto the porch, her hand steady, even as her heart hammered. The figure turned at the sound of the door, and Marian saw it was a man, middle-aged, roughly dressed, watching the house with an expression she'd learned to fear. "Gavin?" she called, not taking her eyes off the stranger. Seconds later, Gavin was beside her, moving with the dangerous speed of someone who'd learned to go from sleep to fighting in a heartbeat. He took in the scene, his body blocking Marian's instinctively. "Help you with something?" Gavin's voice was level, but Marian heard the steel underneath. "Just passing through," the man said. "Saw smoke from your chimney. Thought I might ask for some water. There's a creek half a mile east." "That's so." The man smiled, and it didn't reach his eyes. "Seems unfriendly, turning away a traveler." "Seems smart," Gavin replied, "especially when a traveler's got a Spencer rifle in his saddle and a look like he's not just passing through." The man's smile widened. "You're a cautious one." "I'm a living one. Generally find those go hand in hand." They stared at each other, two predators measuring distance and advantage. Marian's hands tightened on the shotgun, and she saw the man's eyes flick to her, assessing. "That your woman?" he asked Gavin. "That's none of your business." "Pretty thing. Young kids, too, I saw. You're sitting on quite the little family here." Something in Gavin's posture changed, went from cautious to lethal. "You got 3 seconds to get on your horse and ride out." "Or what?" "Or we find out how fast you can draw that Spencer." The moment stretched out, brittle and sharp. Then the man laughed, but there was no humor in it. He raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, no need for trouble. I'll be moving on." He backed toward his horse, never taking his eyes off Gavin, swung into the saddle with practiced ease. But before he rode off, he looked at Marian again. "You take care now, ma'am," he said. "This can be a dangerous country for folks without protection." Then he was gone, disappearing into the gray light of dawn. Marian's hands started shaking only after he was out of sight. Gavin gently took the shotgun from her, set it aside, then turned her to face him. "You okay?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "That was smart, calling for me. Good instincts." "Who was he?" "Nobody good." Gavin's jaw was tight. Could be a drifter, could be a scout for a raiding party. Either way, he was testing us, seeing what we had worth taking. Fear curdled in Marian's stomach. "They'll come back." "Maybe. Or maybe he'll spread word that this place is defended and not worth the trouble." Gavin met her eyes. "But I won't lie to you. We need to be careful now." "We should leave," Marian said, even as her heart broke saying it. "We've brought danger to your door. We should—" "No." Gavin's voice was absolute. "You're not leaving. This is your home now, same as it is mine, and we protect our home." "But—" "Marian." He said her name like it mattered, like she mattered. "I meant what I said that day in town. I took all of you. That means something. That means I don't let you go just because things get hard." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why are you so good to us?" Gavin looked at her for a long moment, something complicated moving across his face. "Because you need someone to be," he said finally. "And I need something to be good for." After the stranger's visit, the ranch became a fortress. Gavin taught Theo how to shoot, how to keep watch, how to read the land for threats. The boy took to it with grim determination, understanding instinctively that he was training for war. Marian kept the shotgun close, jumped at shadows, watched the horizon like she was waiting for the world to end. Again. But days passed, then a week, then 2. No one came. The work continued. Life continued. And slowly, carefully, something else began to grow. Marian caught herself laughing at something Penny said, the sound startling from her throat like a bird remembering how to fly. She noticed the way Gavin's rare smiles changed his whole face, made him look younger and less haunted. She realized she knew his routines now, how he took his coffee, how he moved through his work, how he sat on the porch at day's end like he was making peace with whatever demons still followed him. One morning, she woke to find June standing by the window, watching Gavin and Theo work in the corral. The little girl's mouth was moving, forming silent words. Marian's heart clenched. "June? Baby, what are you saying?" June turned to her mother, and for the first time in almost 2 months, she spoke. "Safe," she whispered. "It's safe here, Mama." Marion gathered her daughter into her arms and wept. A month after they'd arrived, Marion stood in the garden she'd planted, pulling weeds and thinking about permanence. The seeds she'd sown were coming up green: beans, squash, carrots, life pushing through soil, determined to grow. She'd planted them not knowing if they'd still be here to harvest them, but she'd planted them anyway because hope had to start somewhere. Footsteps crunched behind her. She didn't startle anymore when Gavin approached, had learned the sound of his walk, the particular rhythm of him moving through space. "Garden looks good," he said. "It's growing." Marion sat back on her heels, brushing dirt from her hands. "Assuming we're still here come harvest time." "Why wouldn't you be?" She looked up at him, squinting against the sun. "You don't owe us forever, Gavin. You gave us shelter when we needed it, but sooner or later you'll want your house back, your life back." "This is my life now," Gavin said simply. "Has been since you got here." Something in Marion's chest went tight. "You mean that?" "I don't say things I don't mean." He crouched down beside her, close enough that she could see the sincerity in his storm-gray eyes. "I know you're scared to believe this can last. I know you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Marion, you and those kids, you're not a burden. You're not temporary. You're—" He stopped, struggling with words. "You're what makes this place feel like a home instead of just a house I survive in." Marion's breath caught. "Gavin, you don't have to say anything," he said quickly, standing. "I just wanted you to know, so you can stop looking at everything like you're about to have to run again. This is your home, for as long as you want it to be." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her kneeling in the garden with dirt on her hands and tears on her face. But they were good tears this time. That evening, after supper, June climbed into Gavin's lap. Everyone froze. The little girl had been talking in whispers now, short sentences, but she still kept distance from most people. Even Gavin, for all his gentleness, had been held at arm's length. But now she settled against his chest like she belonged there, and Gavin's big hands came up automatically to hold her steady. "Tell me a story," June said, her voice small but clear. "What kind of story?" "A happy one." Gavin looked at Marion, something helpless in his expression. She smiled, nodded. He cleared his throat. "Well," he began, "once there was a man who lived all alone on a big empty ranch. He had cows and chickens and good land, but he was lonely. He didn't even know how lonely until one day a brave family showed up needing help. And when he helped them, he found out something important." "What?" June asked, her eyes wide. "He found out that the best things in life are the things you choose to keep, not the things you were born with. And that family, they were the best thing he'd ever chosen." June smiled, and it was like sunrise after endless night. "Did they stay forever?" Gavin's eyes found Marion's across the room, asking a question without words. "Yes," Marion said softly. "They stayed forever." And in that moment, in that small kitchen with the lamplight warm around them, Marion Hale stopped waiting for the world to take everything away. She'd found a place worth fighting for. She'd found people worth fighting with. She'd found home. The first frost came early that year, painting the windows white and turning the prairie grass brittle. Marion woke to find June pressed against her side, still asleep but seeking warmth even in dreams. Through the window she could see Gavin already up, moving through the pre-dawn darkness toward the barn, his breath steaming in the cold air. 5 weeks. They'd been here 5 weeks, and Marion had almost stopped flinching at unexpected sounds, almost stopped planning escape routes in her head, almost let herself believe this could be real. She slipped from bed without waking the girls and padded into the kitchen. The house had that particular silence of deep cold, every sound muffled and precious. She built up the fire in the stove, set coffee to brew, and started pulling out ingredients for breakfast. Her hands moved through the familiar motions while her mind wandered. Last night's moment, June asking for a story, Gavin's words about choosing what to keep, the way everyone had looked at each other like they were acknowledging something none of them quite knew how to name. It sat in her chest like an ember. Warm, dangerous, full of potential to either comfort or consume. The door opened, bringing a gust of frozen air and Gavin stomping snow from his boots. "Cold enough to freeze the devil's breath out there," he said, then caught himself. Sorry, language. Marion smiled despite herself. I've heard worse. Hell, I've said worse. Still, kids might be waking soon. He moved to the stove, warming his hands over the heat. His fingers were red with cold, the knuckles cracked from hard work and harsh weather. Storm's coming, big one from the look of those clouds. We need to bring the cattle in closer, make sure everything's battened down. What can I do to help? Gavin glanced at her, something soft in his expression. Keep the home fires burning, make sure there's hot food when we come in. That's help enough? I could do more. I'm not fragile. Never said you were. He accepted the coffee cup she handed him, their fingers brushing briefly. But that storm's going to be mean, and I need to know you and the girls are safe and warm in here. That's not me thinking you're weak. That's me not wanting to worry about too many things at once. It was reasonable. It made sense. But part of Marion still chafed at being protected instead of fighting alongside. She'd spent the last 5 weeks rediscovering how to be something other than a survivor in constant motion, but old habits died hard. Fine, she said. But if it gets bad, if you need help, I'll holler. Promise. Theo emerged from the spare room, already dressed, his hair sticking up at odd angles. At 10 years old, he was all sharp angles and growing bones, shooting up so fast his pants were getting too short, despite Marion letting out the hems twice. Morning, Mama. Morning, Gavin. He'd stopped calling him Sir a week ago, and Gavin hadn't corrected him. I can help with the cattle. Figured you'd say that. Gavin drained his coffee. Eat something first. Going to be a long day. They moved around each other in the kitchen's small space with the ease of practice now. Marion fried eggs and salt pork while Gavin and Theo discussed the work ahead. The girls woke and joined them, Penny chattering about the frost patterns on the windows, June quiet but present, her small hand finding Marion's skirt as always. After breakfast, Gavin and Theo bundled into heavy coats and headed out. Marion watched them go, the man and the boy walking side by side toward the barn, and felt that dangerous ember in her chest flare brighter. This looked like family. It felt like family. But she'd learned the hard way that things that looked solid could burn to nothing in a single night. The wind picked up as the morning wore on, rattling the shutters and howling around the corners of the house. Marion kept busy, baking bread, darning socks, teaching Penny her letters while June played with dried beans at the table, arranging them in patterns only she understood. Around midday, the snow started. Not the gentle flurries of early winter, but a wall of white that turned the world beyond the windows into nothing but howling emptiness. Mama? Penny's voice was small. Are they okay out there? They're fine, baby. Your brother's with Gavin, and Gavin knows this land like the back of his hand. But as the hours crept past and the storm grew worse, Marion's certainty wavered. She kept moving to the window, straining to see anything through the whiteout, her hands twisting in her apron. When the door finally burst open near supper time, she nearly cried with relief. Gavin and Theo stumbled in on a gust of wind and snow, both of them crusted white, shaking with cold. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, Marion breathed, rushing forward. Get those wet things off. Theo, by the stove, now. She helped Gavin out of his coat with shaking hands, feeling the ice crystals that had formed in the wool, seeing the way his lips were blue, his movements stiff and slow. We got the cattle secured, he said through chattering teeth, but it's bad out there. Worse than I thought it'd be. You scared me half to death. Sorry. He met her eyes, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of her fear, his gratitude that she'd felt it. Won't happen again. Don't make promises you can't keep. A ghost of a smile. Fair enough. She got them both stripped down to dry clothes, pushed hot coffee and whiskey into their hands, made them sit by the fire until the shaking stopped. Theo's eyes were bright with the adventure of it, but underneath Marion could see the exhaustion, the fear he'd pushed through to keep working alongside Gavin. You did good today, Gavin told the boy. Couldn't have managed without you. Theo straightened, pride warring with weariness on his young face. Really? Really? You're turning into a fine ranch hand. I'm turning into a man. Theo said it like a challenge, like he needed Gavin to confirm it. Gavin considered him seriously. You're getting there. But being a man isn't just about doing hard work. It's about knowing when to ask for help. when to admit you're scared, when to let others carry some of the weight. He glanced at Marion. Took me a long time to learn that, longer than it should have. Something in Theo's expression shifted, softened. Did you get scared today? Hell yes, I was scared. That storm could have killed us both if we'd made a wrong turn. Fear's not weakness, son. It's information. What you do with it, that's what counts. Marion's throat tightened. She turned away, busying herself with supper, blinking back unexpected tears. Gavin was teaching her boy things James never had. How to be strong and vulnerable at once. How to survive without hardening completely. It was a gift she hadn't known she needed to give her son. The storm howled through the night and into the next day, pinning them all inside. The house felt smaller, with 5 people trapped in it, but not in a bad way. They played cards and told stories. Gavin taught the children a song his mother had taught him, something silly about a rabbit and a fiddle. Penny sang it over and over until everyone knew it by heart. June fell asleep in Gavin's lap again, and this time no one remarked on it. It was just how things were now. On the second night, after the children had gone to bed, Marion and Gavin sat by the fire with the last of the coffee. The wind still raged outside, but the house held steady, warm, and secure. "Thank you," Marion said quietly. "For what?" "For what you said to Theo, about fear and asking for help. His father never—" She stopped, choosing words carefully. "James was a good man, but he thought showing any weakness was failing. It made him hard, made him push us away when things got difficult." "I knew men like that in the war," Gavin said. "They died first, usually, too proud to admit they were hurt, too stubborn to fall back when they should have." He stared into the fire. "I learned early that survival sometimes means knowing when to retreat." "Is that what you're doing here? Retreating?" He looked at her then, his eyes catching the firelight. "No. I think maybe I'm finally done retreating, finally found something worth standing my ground for." The air between them felt charged, heavy with words neither of them quite knew how to say. Marion's heart hammered in her chest, and she recognized this feeling. Not fear, not exactly, but the vertigo of standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. "Gavin," she started, then stopped, not sure where the sentence was going. "You don't have to say anything." His voice was rough. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing from everything that happened. I'm not asking for anything, Marion. I just want you to know that when you look at me, what you see is someone who's not going anywhere." "What if I want you to ask for something?" The words escaped before she could stop them, brave and terrifying. Gavin's breath caught. "Marion, I'm not saying I'm ready. I'm not even sure what I'm ready for. But I need you to know that I see you too. That you're not just the man who gave us shelter. You're—" She struggled for words. "You're starting to feel like home." The silence that followed was profound. Then Gavin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip gentle. He didn't pull her closer, didn't push for more, just held her hand like it was something precious. "We'll figure it out," he said. "No rush, no pressure, just figure it out together." Marion nodded, not trusting her voice. They sat like that until the fire burned low, 2 damaged people learning how to trust again, one careful moment at a time. The storm finally broke on the 3rd day, leaving the world buried in white silence. Gavin and Theo had to dig their way out to check on the animals, shoveling a path through drifts that came up to Gavin's chest. 2 of the cattle had died in the cold, and Gavin's face was grim when he told Marion. "That's our meat supply for winter," he said. "We'll butcher them, salt and smoke what we can, nothing wasted." It was brutal work, and Marion insisted on helping despite Gavin's protests. She'd grown up on a farm in Ohio. She knew her way around a butchering. They worked together in the cold, their breath steaming, hands going numb, blood staining the snow. Penny took the girls inside, kept them distracted with games and songs. The child was growing up fast, learning to mother her little sister the way Marion had once mothered her own siblings. It hurt to watch, but there was pride in it too. That evening, with fresh meat hanging in the smokehouse and exhaustion pulling at all of them, a rider appeared on the horizon. Gavin saw him first, stiffening where he stood by the barn. "Inside," he said, his voice carrying the flat command of someone who expected to be obeyed. Now. Marion didn't argue. She gathered the children and moved toward the house, but she grabbed the shotgun on the way. Gavin gave her a sharp look, started to protest, then seemed to think better of it. "Stay inside unless I call for you," was all he said. She positioned herself by the window where she could see but not be easily seen, the shotgun loaded and ready. The children huddled behind her, Theo standing protectively in front of his sisters despite being barely tall enough to make a difference. The rider came in slow, hands visible, no weapon drawn. As he got closer, Marion could see he was young, barely 20, with a patchy beard and nervous eyes. He pulled up about 20 feet from where Gavin stood. "Help you?" Gavin called. "Looking for someone," the young man said. His voice carried in the cold air. "Woman named Marion Hale. Got 3 kids with her. You seen anyone like that?" Marion's blood went cold. Her hands tightened on the shotgun. "Who's asking?" Gavin's tone was carefully neutral. "Man named Victor Lane. He's got business with her." "What kind of business?" The young man shifted in his saddle, uncomfortable. "Her husband owed debts, serious debts. Mr. Lane's been hired to collect. Her husband's dead. Oh, don't matter. Debts pass on. Woman's responsible now." Gavin's laugh was sharp and humorless. "That's not how the law works, son. It's how Mr. Lane works." The young man's jaw set stubbornly. "Look, mister, I'm just the messenger. Mr. Lane, he's coming through in a few days. He'll want to talk to Mrs. Hale, see about settling the matter. Thought I'd ride ahead, give fair warning." "Fair warning of what?" "That it'd be easier on everyone if she comes willingly. Mr. Lane, he can be persuasive when he needs to be." The threat hung in the air, ugly and clear. Gavin took a step forward, and something in his posture made the young man's horse dance sideways nervously. "You ride back and tell Mr. Lane that if he sets foot on my property, he'll be leaving in a pine box. Mrs. Hale doesn't owe him or anyone else a damn thing, and she's under my protection now. He clear on that?" "Mister, you don't want to make an enemy of—" "I've made plenty of enemies. One more won't keep me up at night." Gavin's hand rested on his gun belt, casual but unmistakable. "You've delivered your message. Now get gone." The young man hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Then he tugged his horse's head around and rode off, faster than he'd come in. Gavin stayed outside, watching until the rider disappeared over the horizon. Only then did he turn back to the house, and Marion saw the tension in every line of his body. She met him at the door. "You heard?" "Every word." She was shaking, but her voice was steady. "James did owe money, a lot of it, gambling debts mostly, and other things. I didn't know how much until after he was gone and men started showing up looking for payment. That why the raiders came?" "I think so. I think someone sent them to collect, and when James couldn't pay, She couldn't finish the sentence. Gavin's hands came up to her shoulders, grounding. "Look at me. Marion, look at me." She forced her eyes to his. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "I meant what I told that boy. You're under my protection. Anyone wants to take you or the children, they'll have to go through me first." "Gavin, you don't understand. These aren't just raiders. Victor Lane he's organized, connected. He's got men, resources. He's not going to just walk away because you threatened him." "Then we'll deal with that when he gets here." Gavin's jaw was set. "But we deal with it together. You're not facing this alone." "I should leave. Take the children and go before he comes. I won't bring that kind of trouble to your door." "Too late. It's already here." His hands tightened on her shoulders. "And I'm asking you, no, I'm begging you, don't run. Stay. Fight with me. Trust that I can help keep you safe." Marion wanted to argue, wanted to protect him from her mistakes by leaving, but she was so tired of running, so tired of carrying everything alone. And the way Gavin looked at her, like she was worth fighting for, like her safety mattered more than his own, it broke something open in her chest. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we'll stay. But Gavin, if it comes down to a choice between your life and ours, it won't. But if it does, Marion." He pulled her closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. "There is no choice. You and those kids, you're my family now. I'd die before I let anything happen to you." "That's what I'm afraid of," she said. But she was crying now, her hands fisting in his shirt. Gavin held her while she shook, solid and warm and impossibly stubborn. Behind them, the children watched with wide eyes, understanding on some level that the brief peace they'd found was ending. The next few days passed in tense preparation. Gavin rode into town and came back with ammunition, extra supplies, a rifle he gave to Marion after making sure she knew how to use it. He taught Theo how to keep watch, how to recognize danger approaching. He reinforced the barn doors, checked every fence line, made sure there were no weak points where someone could sneak onto the property. At night, he sat up late cleaning weapons and planning defenses, his face hard and distant. Marion recognized that expression. She'd seen it on soldiers during the war years, men preparing for violence, building walls around anything soft inside them. "Talk to me," she said one night, coming to sit beside him at the table. "Nothing to say. Just getting ready." "You're shutting down, pushing us away." His hand stilled on the rifle he was cleaning. "I'm trying to keep you alive. You're treating us like something you have to protect instead of people you're with." She reached out, covered his hand with hers. "I need you to stay with us, Gavin. Not just physically, I need you here." He looked at her, and for a moment the walls cracked enough that she could see the fear underneath. "I can't lose you," he said, voice rough. "I can't lose any of you. If something happens because I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, then we face it together. But you don't get to shoulder all of this alone. That's not how family works." Family. He said the word like he was testing it, seeing how it fit. "Yes, family." Marion squeezed his hand. "You said we were, so act like it. Let me help carry this weight." Something in him softened. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "I'm not good at this. The trusting people part." "Neither am I. We'll figure it out together. Remember?" A ghost of a smile. "Yeah, together." Victor Lane arrived 4 days later with 5 men at his back. They rode in at noon, when the sun was high and shadows were short. Marion saw them coming from a mile away, 6 riders moving with purpose across the snow-covered plain. Her stomach dropped. "Gavin," she called, keeping her voice level despite the fear clawing at her throat. He was already moving, had probably spotted them before she did. "Get the children in the root cellar," he said. "You stay in the house with the rifle. Do not come out unless I call for you." "Gavin, Marion, please, I need to know you're safe. I can't think clearly if I'm worried about you." She understood that. Hated it, but understood it. "Be careful." "Always am." She gathered the children quickly, her movements calm despite the terror singing through her veins. Theo wanted to stay and fight, his young face fierce, but Marion pulled him close. "I need you to protect your sisters," she told him. "Can you do that for me?" It was manipulation, using his protective instincts, but it worked. He nodded, squared his thin shoulders, and followed Penny and June down into the root cellar. Marion secured the door, covered it with a rug, then positioned herself by the window with the rifle. Gavin stood in the yard, waiting. He didn't draw his weapon, but his hand rested near it, ready. The riders pulled up in a loose semicircle, cutting off easy escape routes. The man in the center was older than the rest, maybe 50, with gray in his beard and cold calculation in his eyes. He wore city clothes, expensive and completely out of place on the frontier, but he sat his horse like he belonged there. Victor Lane. Had to be. "Mr. Rourke, I presume," Lane said, his voice cultured, Eastern. "I believe you received my message." "I did, and I sent a response. You didn't listen." "Oh, I heard you. I simply chose to give you another opportunity to be reasonable." Lane's smile was thin. "I'm looking for Marion Hale. I have business with her." "She's not here." "Now that's interesting, because my scouts tell me a woman matching her description has been seen at this very ranch, along with 3 children. Lane's eyes flicked toward the house. "Are you calling my men liars, Mr. Rourke? I'm calling you a man who needs to turn around and leave my property." Her husband owed a substantial sum, $20,000 to be exact, plus interest. Gavin's expression didn't change. "That's a lot of money for a homesteader." "It is, which is why we're willing to be flexible about collection methods. Mrs. Hale herself would settle the debt nicely, her and the children. There are arrangements that can be made." The implication hit like a physical blow. Marion's hands tightened on the rifle, rage warring with terror. He was talking about selling them, selling her children into God knew what kind of servitude. Gavin's voice went deadly quiet. Say that again. You heard me. There are mining camps, lumber operations, places that always need workers. The woman's young enough to be useful for several years. The boy's strong. The girls can be trained for domestic service. It's a practical solution to an unfortunate situation. You're talking about slavery. I'm talking about debt collection, perfectly legal under territorial contract law. The hell it is. Lane sighed like he was dealing with a stubborn child. Mr. Rourke, I don't want trouble. I'm a businessman. I'm simply recovering assets owed to my employers. If you hand over Mrs. Hale and the children, you can go back to your quiet life. If you don't, he gestured to the men flanking him. Well, that would be unfortunate. Gavin didn't move, but something in his stance shifted. Marion recognized it. The subtle redistribution of weight, the loosening of shoulders that meant a man was preparing to draw. Those people in my house are my family, Gavin said. That makes them off limits. You want them, you go through me. 1 man against 6? Those aren't good odds. I've faced worse. Lane studied him for a long moment, reassessing. You're serious. As death. Very well. Lane's smile turned cold. You had your chance to be civilized about this. He nodded to his men, and everything exploded into violence. One of Lane's men drew first, and Gavin moved faster than Marion thought possible. His gun cleared leather in a blur, fired once, twice. The first man went down screaming, clutching his shoulder. The second dropped his weapon, hands flying up in surrender. The other 3 scattered, looking for cover. Gavin dove behind the water trough, and bullets tore into the wood where he'd been standing a second before. Marion didn't think. She smashed out the window with the rifle barrel and fired at the nearest rider. The shot went wide, but it was enough to make him wheel his horse around, spooked by the unexpected attack from the house. "Marion, stay down!" Gavin shouted, but his voice was nearly lost in the gunfire. One of Lane's men was circling toward the barn, trying to flank Gavin's position. Marion tracked him with the rifle, waited until she had a clear shot, and fired. This time she didn't miss. The man toppled from his horse with a scream, blood blooming on his thigh. Victor Lane had fallen back, using his remaining men as a shield. He was shouting orders, directing them like pieces on a chessboard. But his men were spooked now, caught between Gavin's deadly accuracy and Marion's rifle fire from the house. Another man went down, caught by Gavin's bullet in the leg. He rolled behind a fence post, crying out for his companions to help him, but no one was coming. The smart ones were already retreating. "Enough!" Lane's voice cut through the chaos. "Fall back! Fall back!" The remaining men didn't need to be told twice. They grabbed their wounded and rode hard, leaving trails of blood in the snow. Victor Lane went last, his face twisted with rage, and something that might have been respect. "This isn't over, Rourke," he called back. "I'll return with more men." "I'll be waiting!" Gavin shouted. Then they were gone, disappearing back across the plains, and silence fell like a hammer. Gavin stayed behind the trough for a long moment, gun still drawn, making sure it wasn't a trick. Only when he was satisfied did he straighten, turning toward the house. "Marion, you hit?" "No." She sagged against the window frame, adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking. "No, we're okay." He crossed to the house in long strides, took the stairs 2 at a time. The moment he was inside, Marion found herself pulled against his chest, his arms iron tight around her. "You weren't supposed to shoot," he said into her hair, his voice rough. "You were supposed to stay hidden. They were flanking you. I wasn't going to let them shoot you in the back." He pulled away enough to look at her, and his expression was complicated. Anger, fear, pride all mixed together. "You could have been killed. So could you." She grabbed his shirt. "We're in this together, remember? That means I don't sit in the house while you fight my battles." For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate. A kiss that tasted like gunpowder and relief and the terrifying acknowledgement that they'd both almost died. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Marion said, "The children." They went together to the root cellar, uncovered the door, and found 3 pairs of eyes staring up at them in the darkness. Theo had positioned himself in front of his sisters, a rusted shovel clutched in his hands like a weapon. "Is it over?" he asked, trying to sound brave and almost managing it. "For now," Gavin said. He helped them out, checked them over for injuries, even though they'd been safe below ground. You did good, son. Protected your sisters like I asked. Will they come back? Probably. Then we'll fight them again. Theo's jaw was set, and he looked so much older than 10. We won't let them take us. Gavin rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. No, we won't. That night, after the children were asleep, after they'd cleaned weapons and checked perimeter defenses and done everything they could to prepare for the next attack, Marion and Gavin sat together on the porch. The stars were brilliant overhead, cold and distant and beautiful. Somewhere out there, Victor Lane was regrouping, planning his next move. But here, in this moment, there was peace. I need to tell you everything, Marion said, about James's debts, about what happened before. You don't owe me. I do. She cut him off gently. If we're going to face this together, you need to know what we're facing. So she told him. All of it. How James had always been a gambler, always sure the next hand would be the winning one. How the debts had piled up, small at first, then crushing. How men had started coming around, threatening, demanding. How James had tried to flee and they'd caught him. How the fire had been punishment and warning both. He wasn't a bad man, she said quietly. Just a weak one. And I loved him, but I couldn't save him from himself. Gavin listened without judgment, his hand finding hers in the darkness. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. We'll need help, he said finally. Can't defend against a serious attack with just the two of us. I know some men in town, former soldiers. They owe me favors. I won't let you die for us. And I won't let Lane take you. He turned to face her. Marion, I meant what I said before. You're my family now. All of you. That means something to me. That means everything. Why? She asked, the question that had been building for weeks. Why us? Why take on all this trouble for people you barely know? Gavin was quiet, his eyes on the stars. When he spoke, his voice was soft. After Sarah died, I spent 10 years just existing, going through motions, working the ranch because it was something to do, not because I cared. I was alive, but I wasn't living. He looked at her. Then you walked into that store, half dead and fierce as hell, and something in me woke up, like I'd been holding my breath for a decade and finally remembered how to breathe. Marion's throat tightened. Gavin, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Not trying to push you into something you're not ready for. I just need you to understand why I'm willing to fight for this. For you. Because you made me remember what it feels like to have something worth protecting. She kissed him then, slow and deliberate, pouring into it all the things she didn't have words for. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his. We're going to survive this, she said. Together. Together, he agreed. And beneath the cold stars, on a ranch that had become home, they held each other and prepared for war. The sun hadn't fully risen when the riders came the next morning, 3 men on horseback, but these ones weren't Victor Lane's hired guns. Gavin recognized the lead rider immediately and relaxed his grip on the rifle he'd been holding since dawn. That's Marcus Webb, he told Marion, who'd positioned herself at the window again, shotgun ready. Fought with him in the war. If he's here, it's because I sent word. Marcus Webb was a mountain of a man, broad-shouldered and scarred, with a black beard shot through with gray and eyes that had seen too much. The 2 men with him looked cut from the same cloth, hard men who'd survived hard times and come out the other side still capable of loyalty. Gavin met them in the yard, and Marion watched through the window as the men clasped forearms in the way of soldiers who'd bled together. They spoke in low voices, Marcus gesturing toward the bullet holes in the water trough, the blood still staining the snow, despite Gavin's attempts to cover it. When they came inside, Marcus pulled off his hat and nodded to Marion with surprising gentleness for a man his size. Ma'am, Gavin tells me you've got trouble coming. That's one way to put it, Marion said. She'd learned to read men quickly over the past months, learned to see past surfaces to what lay beneath. What she saw in Marcus Webb was steadiness, competence, and a bone-deep weariness that matched Gavin's, another survivor carrying ghosts. This is Tom Bridger and Sam Chen, Marcus continued, indicating his companions. Tom was lean and weathered, with a frontier accent and calculating eyes. Sam was younger, maybe 25, with Chinese features and the careful posture of someone who'd learned to fight for respect in a country that didn't give it freely. "Pleasure," Tom said, his voice carrying the slow drawl of Texas or somewhere near it. Sam just nodded, but his eyes swept the room professionally, cataloging exits, sightlines, defensible positions, a military habit that probably saved his life more than once. The children had been told to stay in the bedroom, but Theo crept out anyway, drawn by the presence of the strange men. He stopped in the doorway, trying to look brave, and Marcus spotted him immediately. "That your boy?" he asked Gavin. "Might as well be," Gavin replied, and the casual way he said it, the complete lack of hesitation, made Marion's heart clench. "Theo, come here. You should know these men. They're going to help us." Theo approached warily, and Marcus crouched down to his level, studying him seriously. "You know how to shoot, son?" "Gavin's been teaching me." "Good. You might need it." Marcus didn't soften the truth, didn't treat the boy like a child who needed protecting from reality. "When the trouble comes, you stay with your mama and sisters. Keep them safe. Can you do that?" Theo's spine straightened. "Yes, sir." "Good man." Marcus stood, turning back to Gavin. "Now tell me everything about Victor Lane and what we're up against." They gathered around the kitchen table, and Gavin laid out the situation with military precision. The debts, Lane's threats, the attempted collection, and the violence that followed. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker. $20,000, he said when Gavin finished. "That's not gambling debt. That's something else." "What do you mean?" Marion asked. Marcus exchanged glances with Tom and Sam before answering. Victor Lane's reputation precedes him. He's not just a debt collector. He's a flesh trader, pure and simple. Buys up debts for pennies on the dollar, then uses them to force people into labor contracts that are slavery in everything but name. He's got connections in the territorial government, judges on his payroll, enough legal cover to make it look legitimate. "There's nothing legitimate about selling children," Marion said, her voice shaking with rage. "No, ma'am, there's not, but that won't stop him from trying." Marcus leaned forward. "He'll come back with more men, better armed. He won't underestimate you again. And he'll bring legal papers, warrants, whatever documentation he needs to make it look official. That way, if anyone asks questions later, he can say he was simply enforcing a contract." "So what do we do?" Gavin's jaw was tight. "We make it too expensive for him to bother." Tom spoke up for the first time, his voice pragmatic. "Men like Lane, they're businessmen first. If collecting this particular debt costs more than it's worth, he'll move on to easier targets." "How do we make it expensive?" "We fortify this place like it's Fort Sumter," Marcus said. "We make it clear that taking you will cost him men, ammunition, time, and money. And we spread word through every town between here and Denver about what he's really doing. Slavery might be legal on paper in some territories, but people don't like it. Public opinion matters, even out here." "That could take days," Marion protested. "We don't have days. He said he'd be back." "He'll wait," Sam said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken, and everyone turned to look at him. "He's wounded now, in more ways than one. Lost men, lost face. He'll regroup, gather reinforcements, plan better. That gives us maybe a week, 2 if we're lucky." "Then we use that time," Gavin said. "Marcus, can you get word out to the other ranchers? Anyone who's had run-ins with Lane, anyone who might be willing to stand against him?" "Already planned on it. There's at least a dozen men I know who've been burned by flesh traders. They'll come." "I'll ride to the territorial marshal's office," Tom offered. "Even if Lane's got judges bought, there might be law enforcement willing to listen. Worth a shot." "And I'll fortify the ranch," Sam said. "Reinforce the barn, set up proper defensive positions. Maybe rig some surprises for anyone who comes at us." It was a plan, at least. Better than waiting helplessly for the next attack. Marion felt some of the crushing weight lift from her chest, though fear still coiled tight in her stomach. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly. "All of you. You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." The 3 men looked at each other, and Marcus answered. "Ma'am, when Gavin Rourke sends word that he needs help, you come. No questions. That's just how it is with men who've saved your life." He paused. "But more than that, what Lane's doing, what he represents, it's everything we fought against in the war. Doesn't matter which side you were on. The idea that a man can own another person, that children can be property. That's evil. And if you don't stand against evil when you see it, what's the point of anything? Simple words simply said, but they carried the weight of conviction. Marion nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Over the next 3 days, the ranch transformed into a fortress. Sam proved to be a genius at defensive engineering, directing the construction of reinforced positions behind the barn, the water trough, even inside the house itself. He showed Theo how to reload rifles quickly, how to pass ammunition without exposing yourself to fire. The boy absorbed everything like a sponge, his young face set with grim determination. Marcus rode out each morning and returned each evening with news. 3 ranchers had committed to sending men if trouble came. The territorial marshal was looking into the matter, which meant nothing would happen quickly, but at least the legal machinery was moving. Word was spreading through the region about Victor Lane's true business, and public sentiment was turning against him. Tom came back on the 4th day with interesting information. Lane's holed up in Rawlins, about 40 miles east. He's recruiting, paying top dollar for guns. Word is he's put together a force of about 15 men. Oh, 15 against how many of us? Gavin asked. If everyone comes who's promised, maybe 10. Not great odds. We don't need to win, Sam pointed out. We just need to make it costly enough that Lane decides the debt isn't worth collecting. Or we kill him, Theo said quietly from the doorway where he'd been listening. All the adults turned to look at the boy. His face was hard, older than his years, and there was something in his eyes that Marion recognized with horror, the willingness to do violence, to cross lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Theo, no, she said. Why not? He looked at her defiantly. He wants to take us, to sell us like we're cattle. Why shouldn't we kill him first? Because killing changes you, Gavin said quietly. Takes something from you that you never get back. I know, I've done it. But you survived. Did I? Gavin's smile was sad. Some days I'm not sure. Theo, I understand wanting to protect your family. That's good. That's right. But don't be eager for blood. It's a weight you carry forever. Theo's defiance crumbled, and suddenly he was just a scared 10-year-old again. He crossed to his mother and she pulled him close, feeling his thin body shake against hers. I just want them to leave us alone, he whispered. I know, baby. I know. That night, unable to sleep, Marion found Gavin on the porch as usual. It had become their ritual, these quiet hours after everyone else was asleep, when they could drop their guards and just be 2 people trying to survive. He's too young to be thinking about killing, she said, settling beside him. They're all too young for what they've been through. Gavin stared out at the darkness. But this is the world we've given them. We can't protect them from knowing it's ugly. I keep thinking about what happens after. Assuming we survive this, assuming Lane gives up or we stop him somehow. What then? Do we just wait for the next threat? The next man with a grudge or a claim? That's just life on the frontier, always another threat, another challenge. You deal with what comes. I'm tired of just dealing with things. Marion turned to face him. I want to live, Gavin. Really live, not just survive day to day. I want my children to have childhoods, not constant fear. I want... She trailed off, not sure how to articulate the longing that had been growing in her chest. What do you want? I want this. She gestured between them, at the ranch, at everything. This feeling of home, of safety, of family. I want it to be real and permanent, not something that can be ripped away at any moment. Gavin was quiet for a long time. I can't promise nothing will ever threaten us again. That's not realistic, but I can promise I'll fight for this, for us, with everything I have. That enough? It should have been. It was more than she had ever expected to find in the ashes of her old life. But Marion found herself wanting more, wanting guarantees that didn't exist, wanting a future that felt secure. I'm scared, she admitted. Not just of Lane, but of hoping too much. Every time I let myself believe things can be good, they fall apart. Then we build something stronger this time, something that can survive the falling apart. He took her hand. Marion, I know I'm asking a lot, asking you to trust, to hope, to risk your heart again when it's already been broken. But I'm asking anyway, because the alternative is living in fear forever, and that's not living at all. She studied his face in the moonlight, the lines around his eyes, the scars on his temple, the gray starting to show in his hair. He'd lived hard and survived harder, and he was offering her the most precious thing he had, his commitment to try, to hope, to build something worth defending. Okay, she said finally. Okay, we build something stronger. He kissed her then, slow and sweet, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, two damaged people choosing each other despite everything. The moment broke when Sam called from the barn, his voice urgent. "Riders coming! Multiple riders!" Gavin was moving before the words fully registered, Marion right behind him. The yard erupted into controlled chaos, Marcus and Tom emerging from the barn where they'd been sleeping, weapons ready. Sam taking position behind the reinforced fence posts he'd built. Gavin pressing the rifle into Marion's hands with a look that said everything. Protect the children, stay alive, I love you even if we haven't said the words yet. But as the riders came into view, Marcus lowered his weapon with a laugh. "Stand down. That's Henry Garrett and his sons, the reinforcements I sent for." Indeed, the approaching party was flying a white cloth, the universal signal of friendly intent. Henry Garrett turned out to be a grizzled rancher in his 60s with 4 grown sons, all of them armed and ready for a fight. Behind them came 2 more ranchers Marion didn't know, and a priest of all things, a young man who explained he'd heard about Lane's activities and felt morally obligated to bear witness. By dawn, there were 14 armed men on the ranch, plus Marion and Theo. Not an army, but enough to make an attacker think twice. Henry Garrett studied their defensive positions with an experienced eye and nodded approval. "You've done well with what you had. This Lane fellow comes at you. He's going to bleed for it." "That's the idea," Gavin said. "Good." Henry spat tobacco juice into the snow. "I've had my own run-ins with flesh traders, lost a brother to them back in '62. They claimed he owed money, dragged him off to a mining camp. Never saw him again. I'd be pleased to return the favor to one of their kind." The other ranchers had similar stories. Debts manipulated, contracts enforced at gunpoint, people disappeared into labor camps and brothels. Victor Lane had made enemies across the territory, and now those enemies were gathering, united by a common hatred. Father Michael, the priest, set up a small chapel area in the corner of the barn and offered to hear confessions for any who wanted it. To Marion's surprise, several of the hardened ranchers took him up on it. Men preparing for possible death, making peace with their souls. Marion approached the priest herself that afternoon, not sure what she wanted but feeling the need for something. Absolution, maybe. Or just someone to talk to who wasn't part of the coming violence. "I'm not Catholic," she said as she sat across from him in the barn's quiet corner. "Neither am I, technically," Father Michael replied with a gentle smile. "I'm Methodist. But out here we all serve the same God and help where we can. What's on your heart, sister?" "I'm going to kill someone." The words came out flat, certain. "If they come for my children, I'm going to kill whoever tries to take them. No hesitation, no mercy." "Are you asking my permission or my forgiveness?" "I don't know. Both? Neither?" Father Michael considered her seriously. "The 6th commandment says, 'Thou shalt not murder,' not 'thou shalt not kill.' There's a difference. Murder is the unlawful taking of life. Killing in defense of innocence and protection of your children, that's different. It may still carry weight on your soul, but it's not the same sin." "Does that make it okay?" "I don't know that anything about this situation is okay, but I know that God gave you those children to protect, and I know that evil men exist who would harm them. If you stand between your children and evil, if you use violence only as a last resort to protect the innocent, I can't condemn that. I won't." His words didn't absolve her guilt, but they eased it slightly. Marion thanked him and returned to the house, where Penny and June were playing a quiet game with pebbles, trying to maintain some normalcy amid the preparations for war. That evening, as the sun set blood-red over the mountains, Tom returned from another scouting trip with grave news. "Lane's moving. Left Rollins this morning with his full force. They're coming slow, probably planning to arrive tomorrow around midday." "How many?" Gavin asked. "Counted 17, all armed. 2 of them look like professional gunfighters, not just hired muscle." Marcus whistled low. 17 against 14. and they'll have the advantage of choosing when and how to attack. Then we take that advantage away, Sam said. He'd been studying the land around the ranch all week, and now he unrolled a map on the kitchen table. There's a natural bottleneck about 2 miles east, canyon walls on both sides, only one way through. If we position men there, we can slow them down, maybe even turn them back before they reach the ranch. An ambush, Henry said, nodding slowly. Risky, but it might work. Or it might get us killed, one of the other ranchers pointed out. Everything about this might get us killed, Marcus replied. Question is, do we wait here and let them dictate the terms, or do we take the fight to them? All eyes turned to Gavin. He hadn't asked to be the leader, but somehow he'd become it anyway. The final decision rested with him. He looked at Marion, and she saw the question in his eyes. This was her fight, her debt, her danger. Did she want him to risk these men's lives in an offensive action? She thought of June's silence after the fire, of Penny's nightmares, of Theo trying to be a man before he'd finished being a boy. She thought of what Victor Lane wanted to do to them, the hell he planned to sell them into. We fight, she said clearly. We take the fight to them, and we end this. Gavin nodded. Decision made. Sam, Marcus, pick your men and set up at that bottleneck. Wait until they're fully committed to the passage, then hit them hard. The goal isn't to kill them all. It's to break their will to fight. Tom, you and Father Michael stay here with Marion and the children. If any get through, you're the last line of defense. What about you? Marion asked, though she already knew the answer. I'm going with the ambush party. Lane knows me. He'll be looking for me. I need to be there. She wanted to argue, wanted to beg him to stay where it was safe, but she knew that wasn't who he was. He'd fight on the front line because that's what leaders did, what men of honor did. So instead, she just pulled him aside, away from the others, and kissed him hard. Come back to me, she whispered against his mouth. Always. Promise me. Because I love you, Gavin Rourke, and I'm not ready to lose you. His arms tightened around her. I love you too. Have since the day you walked into that store looking like hell itself and still ready to fight the world. I'll come back. We'll finish this. They held each other while the other men made final preparations, while weapons were checked and ammunition distributed, while horses were saddled and positions assigned. Then, as full dark fell, 11 men rode out toward the eastern bottleneck, leaving Marion, the children, Tom, and Father Michael alone at the ranch. The hours that followed were the longest of Marion's life. She tried to keep busy, tried to keep the children distracted, but her mind was with Gavin, imagining every possible disaster. Theo paced like a caged animal, furious at being left behind. Penny clung to her mother. June had gone silent again. Tom checked and rechecked their defensive positions. Father Michael prayed, and Marion waited, rifle across her lap, for either victory or catastrophe. Dawn came gray and cold. No word from the ambush party. The waiting stretched on, every minute an eternity. Then, around mid-morning, a single rider appeared on the horizon, coming fast. Marion's heart stopped until she recognized the horse, Sam's distinctive paint gelding. He was slumped in the saddle, and even from a distance she could see the blood. Tom ran out to meet him, helping him down as Sam nearly collapsed. His left arm was bleeding through a makeshift bandage, his face pale with blood loss. What happened? Marion demanded, running to support his other side as they helped him toward the house. Where are the others? Ambush worked, Sam gasped out. Hit them hard in the bottleneck. But Lane had outriders, scouts we didn't see. They flanked us, came from behind. It turned into a close fight. Gavin? Is Gavin alive? He was when I left. Sent me back to warn you. Lane broke through with maybe 8 men. They're coming here. Be here within the hour. Marion's blood went cold. 8 men. And they only had 3 defenders plus children. How many did we get? Tom asked, helping Sam into a chair. 6 down, 3 ran off. But we lost 2 of ours. Henry's youngest and one of the other ranchers. Marcus took a bullet to the leg, but he's still fighting. They're holding position, trying to slow Lane down, but Sam's head drooped. I'm sorry. We did our best. You did fine, Father Michael said gently, starting to tend Sam's wound. Rest now. We'll handle what comes. Marion's mind raced. 8 men coming, probably furious, definitely out for blood. 3 defenders, one of them wounded. 4 children to protect. The root cellar, she said suddenly. We put the children in the root cellar like before. Board it up, hide it. If Lane gets past us, maybe they won't find them. And if he does find them? Theo asked, his voice shaking but determined. I'm not hiding while you fight. I'm not. Theo? No, Mama. I'm 10 years old enough to help, old enough to fight for my family. He picked up the rifle Gavin had been teaching him with. Please, let me be a man when it matters. Marion looked at her son, saw the fear and courage warring in his young face, and felt something break open in her chest. He was too young, far too young. But this was the world they lived in, and he was right. He could help. And she needed all the help she could get. Stay behind cover, she said finally. You do exactly what Tom says, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Yes, ma'am. She pulled him close, pressed a kiss to his hair. I'm proud of you. Your father would be proud of you. Then there was no more time for sentiment. Tom was organizing their positions, Sam in the house despite his wound, covering the front approach. Tom himself in the barn with a clear sight line to the yard. Marion and Theo behind the reinforced water trough, with orders to focus on keeping attackers pinned rather than scoring kills. Father Michael volunteered to stay with the girls in the root cellar, armed with a pistol and instructions to shoot anyone who wasn't family who tried to come down. They barely finished preparations when the riders appeared. 8 men, just as Sam had said, led by Victor Lane himself. His expensive city clothes were torn and dirty now, stained with blood and gunpowder. His face was twisted with rage as he pulled up his horse at the edge of rifle range. "Rourke!" he shouted. "I know you're in there. This ends now. Send out the woman and children, and maybe I'll let the rest of you live." Tom answered from the barn. "Rourke's not here, but his friends are, and we don't negotiate with slavers." Lane's laugh was ugly. "Friends? You think these frontier trash will die for a whore and her bastards? I'm offering you one chance. Walk away now, and you keep your lives." "Go to hell!" That was Sam, his voice weak but defiant. "So be it." Lane gestured, and his men spread out, clearly planning a coordinated assault from multiple angles. These weren't the frightened hired guns from before. These were professionals, men who killed for a living and were good at it. The first shots came from 3 directions at once. Bullets slammed into the water trough, the barn walls, the house itself. Marion ducked lower, feeling splinters fly over her head, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Beside her, Theo aimed carefully and squeezed the trigger. His shot went wide, but it was close enough to make one of Lane's men dive for cover. "Good," Marion said. "Keep them pinned. Don't try to be a hero." She raised her own rifle, sighted on a man trying to circle toward the house, and fired. The kick slammed into her shoulder, but she saw the man stumble, grab his side. Not dead, but out of the fight. The battle descended into chaos, gunfire, screaming, the smell of powder and blood. Sam was firing from the house, his shots methodical despite his injury. Tom had a rifle in each hand, alternating shots so fast it seemed impossible. And Marion fought like a woman possessed, loading and firing, her world narrowed to the simple mechanics of survival. 2 of Lane's men went down, then a third. But Tom took a bullet that spun him around, and his next shot went wild. Sam's ammunition ran out, and in the precious seconds it took him to reload, one of Lane's men made it to the house, smashing through a window. Marion heard Sam's shout, heard the struggle inside, and her blood turned to ice. The root cellar was in the house. If they got inside, if they found the hidden door. "Stay here," she told Theo. Then she was running, keeping low, rifle in hand. She burst through the front door to find Sam grappling with a man twice his size, both of them struggling for control of a knife. The bandit had his back to her. Marion didn't hesitate. She brought the rifle butt down on the back of his head with all her strength. He dropped like a stone. "The cellar," Sam gasped, blood running from a reopened wound. "Check the cellar!" She ran to the kitchen, pulled back the rug, and found Father Michael standing at the top of the cellar stairs, pistol in hand, his face white but determined. "They didn't get past me," he said simply. Relief flooded through her, but there was no time. She could hear more men approaching, hear Theo calling out in alarm. She ran back outside in time to see 2 men closing in on her son's position, and rage overrode fear. She fired both barrels of the shotgun she'd grabbed on the way out, and one man went down screaming. The other turned toward her, raising his pistol, and time seemed to slow. She saw his finger tighten on the trigger, knew she couldn't reload fast enough, knew she was about to die. Then a rifle cracked from somewhere behind the barn, and the man's head snapped back. He fell, and behind him Marion saw Gavin riding hard, Marcus and the others streaming in behind him. They'd broken free from the Eastern fight and made it back just in time. What followed was brutally quick. Lane's remaining men, caught between the defenders and the new arrivals, threw down their weapons. All except Lane himself, who spurred his horse toward the road in a desperate attempt to escape. Gavin rode after him, and Marion's heart stopped as she watched them disappear over the rise. Seconds stretched like hours. Then a single gunshot echoed across the valley. Gavin reappeared, alone, his face grim. He rode slowly back to the ranch, dismounted carefully, and walked straight to where Marion stood frozen in the yard. "It's over," he said quietly. "He's dead. It's over." And then, finally, Marion's legs gave out. Gavin caught her before she hit the ground, holding her while she shook, while the terror and rage and relief all crashed over her at once. Around them, men were checking wounds, securing prisoners, beginning the grim work of dealing with the dead. But in that moment, holding each other in the aftermath of violence, Marion and Gavin were just two people who'd survived impossible odds, who'd fought for their family and won. The girls emerged from the root cellar, frightened but unharmed. Theo limped over, sporting a graze on his arm that he wore like a badge of honor. The defenders gathered, exhausted, bloodied, but alive. They'd lost 3 good men. 5 more were wounded, some seriously. But they'd won. They'd stood against evil and pushed back. As the sun climbed higher, burning away the gun smoke and the shadows, Marion looked around at this ranch that had become home, at these people who'd become family, at the man who'd risked everything to protect them. "Is it really over?" she asked Gavin quietly. He pulled her closer, his arms solid and real around her. "This part is. There'll be other challenges, other threats. That's just life. But we'll face them together. Together." The most beautiful word in the English language. Marion let herself lean into him, let herself finally, truly believe that they were safe, that they could build something lasting here, that love and courage and stubbornness might actually be enough. The battle was over. The war was won. And life, real life, could finally begin. The weeks following the battle passed in a blur of healing and rebuilding. The wounded men recovered slowly in the barn that had been converted into a makeshift infirmary, with Father Michael tending to their injuries and Marion bringing food and clean bandages 3 times a day. Marcus's leg wound kept him laid up for 2 weeks, but he bore it with good humor, claiming he'd survived worse in the war, and at least this time he had decent company. The bodies of the fallen, both friend and enemy, were buried on a hillside overlooking the ranch. Father Michael conducted services for all of them, refusing to discriminate between the men who'd died defending innocence and those who died trying to harm them. "God sorts them out in the next life," he said simply. "In this one, they all deserve to go into the ground with dignity." Marion stood at those graves every morning for the first week, looking at the fresh-turned earth and thinking about the 3 men who died defending her family. Henry Garrett's youngest son had been only 19, barely more than a boy. She hadn't even learned his first name before he'd taken a bullet meant for someone else. "You can't carry their deaths," Gavin told her one morning, finding her there as the sun rose. "They made their choice. They knew the risks. That doesn't make it easier." "No, it doesn't." He stood beside her, his hand finding hers. "But we honor them by living, by building something good with the life they helped protect." She knew he was right, but grief didn't follow logic. It sat heavy in her chest alongside the relief and joy of survival, a complicated tangle of emotions she didn't know how to sort through. The territorial marshal finally arrived 3 weeks after the battle, accompanied by 2 deputies and a look of bureaucratic resignation. He interviewed everyone, examined the bodies of Victor Lane and his men, reviewed the documents Lane had been carrying that outlined his debt collection schemes and labor contracts. The evidence was damning, painting a picture of systematic exploitation that had been going on for years across multiple territories. "This is bigger than one man's operation," the marshal said, sitting at Marion's kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a weary expression. Lane was working for someone, probably someone back east with political connections. "This won't end cleanly." "What does that mean for us?" Gavin asked. Means you're clear of any wrongdoing. Self-defense, protection of innocence, defense of property. It's all justified. But the people Lane worked for, they might not see it that way. They might send someone else. Marion's stomach dropped. So we're just supposed to wait for the next threat? The marshal sighed. I'm not saying that. I'm saying be careful. Keep your guard up. But honestly, after what happened here, after the losses Lane's employers took trying to collect on this debt, I'd be surprised if they thought it was worth pursuing. Sometimes the best way to end a fight is to make yourself too expensive to be worth fighting. That's what Marcus said, Gavin replied. Marcus Webb's a smart man. Listen to him. The marshal stood, settling his hat on his head. For what it's worth, you folks did right. What Lane was doing, what he represented, it's a stain on the territory. Good men like you standing up against it, that matters. After the marshal left, Marion and Gavin stood on the porch watching him ride away. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold, and the ranch looked peaceful, almost idyllic. It was hard to believe that just weeks ago blood had stained this ground. Do you think he's right? Marion asked. That they won't come after us again? I think we made it very clear that we're not easy targets. Gavin's arm came around her shoulders, and I think word spread. Everyone between here and Denver knows what happened, knows what we were fighting against. That kind of publicity makes it hard for men like Lane's employers to operate. So we just go back to normal life? I don't think there's any back about it. We go forward, build something new. Building something new turned out to be harder and better than Marion had expected. The ranch needed repairs from the battle damage. Bullet holes in the barn walls, a shattered window in the house, fence posts that had been used for cover and needed replacing. But the work felt different now, purposeful rather than desperate. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were creating a home. Marcus stayed on after his leg healed, claiming he had nowhere better to be and the ranch could use an extra hand. Tom Bridger drifted back after a month with news that Lane's organization had collapsed. Its leaders either arrested or fled, and the territorial government was actually investigating labor exploitation for once. Sam Chen came and went, but he always returned, drawn by something he never quite put into words. Maybe the sense of belonging, of being valued for who he was rather than judged for what he looked like. The children healed too, in their own ways and their own time. Theo shot up another 3 inches and started filling out with muscle from ranch work, looking more like a young man than a boy. He still had nightmares sometimes, still carried the weight of what he'd seen and done, but Gavin worked with him patiently, teaching him that strength wasn't the absence of fear, but the ability to function despite it. Penny bloomed like a wildflower, her natural exuberance returning now that the shadow of constant threat had lifted. She sang constantly, made friends with every animal on the ranch, and started teaching June her letters with a patience that astounded Marion. The little girl had a gift for nurturing, for seeing what others needed and providing it without being asked. June spoke more now, though she still had long stretches of silence. But the silences felt different, contemplative rather than traumatized. She followed Gavin around like a devoted shadow, and he never seemed to mind, adjusting his stride so she could keep up, explaining what he was doing in simple words she could understand. One afternoon, Marion found them in the barn, June sitting on a hay bale, while Gavin showed her how to braid leather for a bridle. Like this? June asked, her small fingers struggling with the strips. Exactly like that. You're a natural. Gavin? June's voice was soft. Are you going to be my papa now? Gavin's hands stilled. He glanced at Marion, who'd frozen in the doorway, her heart in her throat. She'd wondered when this question would come, had dreaded it, and hoped for it in equal measure. Would you like me to be? Gavin asked carefully. June thought about it with the seriousness of a child considering a weighty matter. My other papa went away and didn't come back. Will you go away too? No, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. June nodded, satisfied, and went back to braiding leather. But Gavin looked at Marion with an expression that held questions, hope, and something deeper. A longing for the kind of belonging that went beyond circumstance and into choice. That night, after the children were asleep and the ranch was quiet, Marion found Gavin in his usual spot on the porch. But instead of sitting beside him as she normally did, she stood in front of him, her hands nervous and her heart pounding. June asked you if you were going to be her papa, she said. She did. What did you mean when you said you weren't going anywhere? Gavin stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. I meant that I love you, Marion Hale. I love you and those 3 kids like you're my own blood. I meant that I want to build a life with you, not just share space with you. I meant, he paused, seeming to gather courage. I meant that I want to marry you, if you'll have me. The words hung in the night air, precious and terrifying. Marion's eyes filled with tears, and she saw panic flash across Gavin's face. I know it's too soon, he said quickly. I know you're still healing from James, still figuring out who you are outside of survival mode. I'm not trying to pressure you, I just— Yes, Marion interrupted. Gavin stopped mid-sentence. What? Yes, I'll marry you. The tears spilled over, but she was smiling. I love you, Gavin Rourke. I love the way you took us in without question. I love how you treat my children like they're yours. I love your steadiness, your strength, the way you make me feel safe enough to hope again. So yes, if you're asking, my answer is yes. He pulled her into his arms with a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, and kissed her with all the pent-up longing of months of careful distance, of holding back, of being afraid to want too much. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marion pressed her forehead to his. When? She asked. Whenever you want, tomorrow, next month, next year, I'm not going anywhere. Next month, she decided. That gives us time to do it properly, to invite people, to make it real. It's already real. Then we'll make it official. The next morning, Marion told the children over breakfast. Theo looked relieved, like he'd been waiting for the adults to acknowledge what everyone already knew. Penny squealed with delight and immediately started planning what she would wear. June just smiled, that serene expression that said she'd known this was coming all along. Does this mean Gavin's really going to be our papa? Penny asked. If you want him to be, Marion said carefully. You don't have to call him that if you don't want to. Your father— Our father's dead, Mama. Theo's voice was matter-of-fact, not cruel, but honest. He was our father, and we loved him, but he's gone. Gavin's here. Gavin's the one who teaches me, protects us, makes you smile. That makes him our father now, doesn't it? Out of the mouths of babes and 10-year-old boys who'd been forced to grow up too fast. Marion nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Then it's settled, Theo said, in a tone that was pure Gavin. Decisive, final, moving forward. When's the wedding? Planning the wedding became a community affair. Word spread through the neighboring ranches, and everyone wanted to contribute something. The women came with fabric for a dress, offering to sew it together. The men built benches for the ceremony, constructed an arch from freshly cut wood. Father Michael agreed to officiate, of course, his round face beaming with joy at the prospect. Marcus appointed himself unofficial coordinator, herding people and projects with the same efficiency he'd once used commanding troops. Someone has to make sure this doesn't descend into chaos, he said, when Gavin teased him about it. And Lord knows you two are too love-struck to think straight. Tom rode out to collect wildflowers from the high meadows, returning with armfuls of columbine and Indian paintbrush. Sam built a table large enough to hold food for 50 people, his carpentry skills producing something so beautiful it seemed a shame to put dishes on it. Even the children helped, June making garlands from grass and flowers, Penny practicing songs to sing during the ceremony. 3 weeks before the wedding, a stranger appeared at the ranch. A well-dressed man in his 50s, traveling in a carriage that had no business on frontier roads. Gavin met him with his hand on his gun, wary of anything that looked like it came from the city and money, but the man raised his hands peacefully. My name is Theodore Harrison, he said. I'm a lawyer from Chicago. I've been looking for Marion Hale. Marion's stomach dropped. She stepped forward, positioning herself where she could protect the children if needed. I'm Marion Hale. Mrs. Hale, I apologize for the intrusion. I've been trying to locate you for several months regarding your late husband's estate. James didn't have an estate. He had debts. That's what I thought as well, which is why this case proved so interesting. Harrison pulled out a leather case and withdrew some papers. It turns out your husband did owe significant gambling debts, as you know. However, what you may not know is that approximately 3 years ago, He won a considerable sum at a poker game in Denver, nearly $30,000. Marion's head spun. That's not possible. We were barely surviving 3 years ago. If James had won that much, he put it in a trust, Harrison continued. Specifically, he put it in a trust for his children's education and welfare, with the funds to be released only in the event of his death or at his written authorization. The trustees were a banking firm in Denver that has since been absorbed by a larger institution, which is how the money was initially lost in the shuffle of reorganization. Why would he do that? Marion's voice shook. Why hide money while we were struggling? Harrison's expression was sympathetic. According to the trust documents, he was trying to protect it from himself. He wrote a letter to accompany the trust, sealed, to be opened only by you. I have it here. He held out an envelope, yellowed with age, with James's handwriting on the front. For Marion, if I'm gone. Marion's hands trembled as she took it. She looked at Gavin, who nodded encouragement, then broke the seal and began to read. The letter was short, written in James's careless scrawl. My dearest Marion, if you're reading this, I'm dead or gone, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for so many things, for the gambling, for the debts, for being weak when you needed me strong. I know I'm not the man you deserved, not the father our children deserve. I won this money and my first instinct was to gamble it again, to double it, to prove I was worth something. But then I looked at Theo sleeping and I realized what I'd become, what I'd risk. So I hid it away where I couldn't touch it, couldn't lose it in a moment of weakness. Use it to give our children better than I gave them. Use it to build a life without the shadow of my failures. You were always the strong one, Marion. You were always enough. I'm sorry I wasn't. James. Marion finished reading and had to sit down, the letter clutched in her hands. All those years of struggle, of watching their children go hungry, of scraping by on nothing, and there had been money the whole time. Money James had won and hidden away, not out of cruelty, but out of a desperate attempt to save his family from his own weakness. How much? She asked quietly. How much is left after lawyer fees and administration? $28,734, Harrison said, plus accrued interest. It's yours, Mrs. Hale. Yours and your children's. It was a fortune. More money than Marion had ever imagined having. Enough to buy their own ranch, to send the children to university, to live comfortably for years. It was freedom, opportunity, everything they'd fought for made suddenly, impossibly real. She looked at Gavin, wondering what this changed. Money made people different, made relationships complicated. Would he still want her now that she wasn't desperate, wasn't dependent on his charity? But Gavin just smiled, that quiet expression that meant he understood what she was thinking. Congratulations, he said simply. Your children's future just got a whole lot brighter. Our children, she corrected. If we're getting married, they're our children. Which means this money, it's yours, Gavin interrupted firmly. I'm not marrying you for money, Marion. I don't want your late husband's winnings. What I want is you and those kids and the life we're building. Everything else is just details. Theodore Harrison cleared his throat delicately. If I might make a suggestion. The money could be kept in trust for the children's education, as your late husband intended. Or it could be used to expand this ranch, provide security for your family. There are many options. I need to think about it, Marion said. Her mind was reeling, trying to process this sudden reversal of fortune. Of course. I'll be staying at the hotel in town for the next week, if you need to reach me. Harrison tipped his hat. Congratulations on your upcoming marriage, Mrs. Hale. Your husband would be happy to know you've found someone who values you as you deserve. After he left, Marion sat on the porch steps with the letter in her hands, trying to reconcile the James she'd known with the James who'd written these words. He'd been weak, yes, and his weakness had cost them dearly. But he'd also tried, in his own broken way, to protect them. Are you angry with him? Gavin asked, sitting beside her. I don't know what I am. Relieved? Grateful? Furious that he let us struggle when there was money available? She shook her head. He was trying to save us from himself. I understand that, but it doesn't make the hunger we went through hurt less. No, it doesn't. Gavin took her hand. But it does mean you have choices now. Real choices about your future, about the children's future. That's worth something. What do you think I should do with it? I think you should do whatever feels right. Keep it, spend it, invest it, give it away. It's yours to decide. Marian thought about it for a long time, turning possibilities over in her mind. That night, she gathered the children and told them about the money, about their father's letter, about the choices they now had. Does this mean we're rich? Penny asked, eyes wide. It means we're secure, Marian corrected. It means you can go to school, get educations, have opportunities your father and I never had. Can we stay here? June's voice was small. With Gavin, I don't want to leave. Of course we're staying here, silly, Theo said. This is home. And just like that, the decision was made. They would stay at the ranch, use some of the money to expand and improve it, put the rest in trust for the children's education. They would build their life here, in this place that had saved them, with the man who'd chosen them. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the sky that impossible blue that only happens in Wyoming, the mountains sharp against the horizon. Marian woke before dawn, her stomach full of butterflies, and found she couldn't go back to sleep. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake the girls, and went to check on the preparations. The ranch had been transformed. The arch Marcus and the others had built was covered in wildflowers, their colors bright against the weathered wood. Benches had been arranged in neat rows facing the arch, with a path between them marked by more flowers. Tables groaned under the weight of food the neighbor women had brought. Roasted chickens, fresh bread, pies, preserves, dishes Marian didn't even have names for. It looked like a celebration, like joy, like hope made visible. Couldn't sleep either? Marcus's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him leaning against the barn, a cup of coffee in his hand. Too excited, or too nervous. Maybe both. It's good to see you happy. Marcus studied her with those knowing eyes. You've come a long way from the half-dead woman who stumbled into town months ago. We all have. Marian accepted the coffee cup he offered. Thank you, Marcus, for everything, for coming when Gavin called, for fighting for us, for staying. You've become family. That's what you do for family. You show up. He smiled. Besides, Gavin needed someone to keep him honest. Man was too much alone before you came along. And now? Now he's got everything a man could want. Good woman, good kids, good land. He's got purpose again. That's worth more than gold. The morning passed in a flurry of preparation. The women helped Marian into the dress they'd sewn. Simple blue calico, but made with such care that it felt like something precious. They braided flowers into her hair, fussed over her appearance until she hardly recognized herself in the mirror. She looked young again, happy again, like the girl she'd been before hardship had carved lines into her face. Penny and June were dressed in matching dresses of soft yellow, their hair in ribbons. They looked like sunshine made human, their faces glowing with excitement. Theo wore new pants and a shirt Marcus had helped him pick out in town, and he stood tall, proud to be giving his mother away, even as his eyes shone with unshed tears. Father Michael took his position under the arch as guests began arriving. The neighboring ranchers and their families, Tom and Sam, looking uncomfortable in clean clothes. Even the shopkeeper from town and the territorial marshal who'd come to witness what he called the good ending to a hard story. Then it was time, and Marian stood at the end of that flower-lined path with Theo beside her, looking at Gavin waiting at the arch. He wore his best clothes, his hair slicked back, his face clean-shaven, but what stopped her heart was the expression in his eyes, pure, unguarded love and wonder, like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. "Ready, Mama?" Theo whispered. "Ready." They walked together down that path, and with each step Marian felt the weight of the past falling away. The fear, the grief, the desperate struggle for survival, all of it receding like shadows before sunlight. By the time she reached Gavin and he took her hands in his, she felt lighter than she had in years. Father Michael began the ceremony with words about love and commitment, about building lives together, about choosing each other every day. But Marian barely heard him. She was lost in Gavin's eyes, in the promise she saw there, in the future stretching out before them bright and full of possibility. When it came time for vows, Gavin spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Marian, I was a dead man walking before you came into my life. Just going through motions, waiting for nothing. You and your children, you brought me back. You gave me purpose, gave me family, gave me a reason to wake up every morning and be grateful. I promise to love you fiercely, protect you always, and build a life with you that honors what we survived to get here. I promise to be the father your children deserve, the partner you can count on, and the man who never stops choosing you. Marion's turned, and her voice shook but held strong. Gavin, you saved us. Not just from danger, but from despair, from giving up, from forgetting that the world could be good. You showed me that strength doesn't mean hardness, that protection doesn't mean control, that love doesn't mean possession. You taught my children how to hope again, how to laugh again, how to trust again. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to share both burdens and joys, to build this life with you one day at a time. I promise to love you with everything I am, everything I have, everything I hope to become. Father Michael pronounced them husband and wife, and when Gavin kissed her, the assembled crowd cheered. Theo and Penny and June rushed forward, wrapping their arms around both of them, and suddenly it was a family embrace, all five of them holding each other while the world celebrated around them. The party that followed lasted until well after dark. There was music and dancing, laughter and stories, food and drink shared freely among people who'd become more than neighbors. They'd become community. Marion danced with Gavin under the stars, then with each of her children, then with Marcus, who claimed he needed practice for when he found his own bride someday. As night deepened and the crowd began to thin, Marion found herself standing apart from the celebration for a moment, just watching. Watching Gavin swing June through the air while she shrieked with delight. Watching Theo and Sam in deep conversation about something technical and serious. Watching Penny teach some of the younger children a clapping game, her voice carrying clear and sweet through the night. This was her life now. Not the ashes of what was lost, but the building of something new. Not survival, but actual living. Not alone, but surrounded by family, chosen and fought for and earned through courage and stubbornness and sheer refusal to give up. Father Michael appeared beside her, his expression content. Beautiful, isn't it? The way broken things can become whole again? Is that what we are? Whole. Getting there. Healing takes time, but you're on the path. He smiled. You know, I've married a lot of couples over the years. Some of them were young and foolish. Some were practical arrangements. Some were last chances at happiness. But this is two people who've walked through fire and chose each other on the other side. That's the kind of love that lasts. I hope so, Marion said softly. God, I hope so. Hope's a good start. But you've also got something better, commitment, the determination to keep choosing each other even when it's hard. That's what makes it work. Later, when the last guests had left and the children were finally asleep, exhausted from excitement, Marion and Gavin stood together on their porch, looking out over the ranch that was truly theirs now, married and merged, a family-in-law as well as heart. Happy? Gavin asked, his arm around her waist. Happier than I thought possible. Marion leaned into him. Do you remember what you said that first day? That you'd take all of us? I remember. Did you know then? Did you have any idea what you were signing up for? Gavin was quiet, considering. I knew you needed help. I knew I had room. Beyond that, he shrugged. I didn't think about it too hard, just knew it was the right thing to do. That simple? That's simple. He turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face. Best decision I ever made, taking you in. Gave me back my life. You gave me back mine. They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other under the stars, before Gavin spoke again. I've been thinking about the money. James's money. What about it? We should use some of it to build a school, a real school, not just for our kids, but for all the children in the area. There's enough young families around now that it makes sense. Marion pulled back to look at him. A school? James wanted his money to go toward education. This way it helps not just our children, but everyone's children. Seems right. Gavin's expression was thoughtful. And maybe we expand the ranch, bring on more hands, build it into something that can employ people, support families, turn it into something that matters beyond just us. Building a legacy, Marion said softly. Building a future. For our kids and everyone else's kids. Making this place, this community, somewhere people want to be rather than somewhere they're just surviving. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious. But looking at the man she'd married, the man who'd taken in a desperate widow and her children without hesitation, Marion believed they could do it. Together, they could build something that mattered. Okay, she said, let's build a future. The months that followed were busy ones. True to their word, Gavin and Marion used James's money to begin construction on a schoolhouse, a sturdy building that would serve the growing community. They hired a teacher from back east, a young woman named Clara, who was eager for adventure and believed in education as a path to opportunity. The school opened in the fall, and 23 children attended that first day, including Theo, Penny, and June. The ranch expanded too. They brought on 4 permanent hands, including Sam, who finally admitted he had nowhere better to be. They built a bunkhouse for the men, expanded the barn, bought more cattle. Gavin taught Theo the business side of ranching, bookkeeping, contracts, animal husbandry, preparing him to one day run the operation himself. Penny discovered a talent for drawing, filling page after page with sketches of the ranch, the animals, her family. Clara encouraged it, teaching her perspective and technique, and soon Penny's drawings were decorating the walls of the house and the schoolroom, bright glimpses of the world through a child's eyes. June remained quieter than her siblings, but she had a gift for animals that bordered on uncanny. She could calm a spooked horse with a touch, knew instinctively when cattle were sick, spent hours with the ranch dogs teaching them tricks and commands. Gavin said she'd be the best ranch hand of them all someday if she wanted to be. Winter came hard that year, but they were ready for it. The house was warm, the pantry full, the animals secured. They spent long evenings by the fire, the children doing lessons while Marion sewed and Gavin worked on account books. Sometimes Marcus or Tom or Sam would join them, and they'd play cards or tell stories, filling the house with laughter and companionship. One particularly cold night in January, about a year after the wedding, Marion sat in the rocking chair Gavin had built for her and realized she was completely, genuinely happy. Not the desperate happiness of escape, not the tentative happiness of early safety, but the deep, abiding happiness of a life well built. "What are you thinking about?" Gavin asked, looking up from his book. "I'm thinking about how far we've come. About that morning in the general store when you said you'd take all of us. About how terrified I was, and how desperate, and how sure I was that nothing good would ever happen again. And now? Now I can't imagine being anywhere else, being anyone else. This life we've built, this family we've become, it's more than I ever hoped for." Gavin set his book aside and came to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Marion Rourke, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and these children, this family, this life, it's everything I never knew I was missing." She kissed him, soft and sweet, mindful of the children watching from where they pretended to do homework. When she pulled back, all 3 kids were grinning at them. "Gross," Theo said, but he was smiling. "You'll understand someday," Gavin told him, "when you meet someone who makes your heart forget how to beat properly." "Never," Theo declared dramatically. "I'm going to be a bachelor forever." They all laughed, and the conversation moved on to other things. Penny's latest drawing, June's progress with training the new pup, Theo's struggles with mathematics. Normal family talk, ordinary and precious. Later, after the children were in bed, Gavin produced a small wooden box he'd been working on in secret. He handed it to Marion with an expression that was almost shy. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, were 5 wooden figures, a man, a woman, and 3 children, each carved with meticulous detail and sanded smooth. They were clearly meant to represent their family, and the workmanship was beautiful. "I've been working on these for months," Gavin said. "Thought we should have something to remember this time by, the time we became a family." Marion picked up the smallest figure, June, and marveled at the detail. He'd captured something essential in each one, some quality that made them recognizably who they were. "They're perfect. I carved their initials on the bottom, and on the man—" He picked up the figure of himself and showed her the base. In addition to his initials, he'd carved a date. The day you walked into that store. The day everything changed. Tears pricked at Marian's eyes. You remember the exact date? I remember everything about that day. How you looked half dead but still fierce. How the kids stayed close to you even though they were starving. How you didn't ask for charity, just water, like you were determined not to be a burden. How I looked at you all and thought, these are people worth knowing. And now we're people worth keeping? Now you're my people, my family, my whole world. She set the figures back in the box carefully and then climbed into Gavin's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. Thank you for seeing us that day, for taking us in, for becoming everything we needed. Thank you for letting me. They held each other in the quiet house, two survivors who'd found each other in the ashes and built something beautiful from the ruins. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, covering the world in white. But inside there was warmth and light and love, the kind that endures through all seasons, through all challenges, through all the years to come. Spring arrived with a rush of green and birdsong, the prairie transforming from brown to a sea of grass and wildflowers. The school was thriving, the ranch was prosperous, and the family was happy. Marian planted an ambitious garden with help from June, who had inherited her mother's green thumb. Theo worked alongside Gavin from dawn to dusk, his skills growing daily. Penny spent her free time sketching the changing landscape, capturing the beauty of their home in lines and shading. One morning in late May, Marian woke feeling strange, nauseous and tired in a way that was familiar but unexpected. She lay still for a moment, counting days, doing mental calculations, until certainty settled over her like a blanket. She was pregnant. The realization was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. She was 41 years old, had 3 children already, had survived violence and loss and rebuilding. Did she really want to start over with an infant? Could her body even handle it at her age? But underneath the fear was joy, pure and bright. A child of this new life, this new love, a baby born into security and happiness, into a home filled with laughter instead of desperation. The physical manifestation of everything they'd built together. She told Gavin that night, after the children were asleep, sitting on their porch in the familiar darkness. His reaction was everything she'd hoped for. Surprise, then wonder, then unguarded delight. A baby? He said it like he was testing the word, making sure it was real. We're having a baby? I think so. I'm fairly certain. Marian laughed at his expression. Are you happy about it? Happy? He pulled her into his arms. Marian, I never thought... I'd given up on the idea of children, on having that kind of family. And now not only do I have 3 incredible kids, but another one on the way. I'm beyond happy. He struggled for words. I'm grateful. So grateful I could burst with it. They told the children the next morning over breakfast. The reactions varied. Theo looked slightly horrified at the mechanics of it all. Penny squealed with excitement about having a baby sister. She'd already decided the sex. And June just smiled that knowing smile and said, I already knew. I heard the baby's heart singing. Whatever that meant. The pregnancy was harder than Marian's previous ones, her body older and less resilient. But she was healthier now, better fed, less stressed, and Clara the teacher had worked as a midwife before coming west. Between Clara's knowledge and Gavin's hovering attention, Marian was probably the most cared-for pregnant woman in the territory. The baby came in December, born during a gentle snowfall that seemed like a blessing. It was a long labor, but not a difficult one, and when Marian finally held her son, yes, to Penny's disappointment, it was a boy, she felt something click into place. This child, born into love and security, represented everything they'd fought for. What should we name him? Gavin asked, his finger gently stroking the baby's cheek. Marian had been thinking about this for months. I want to name him James, she said quietly, after my first husband. He made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but he tried to protect us in the end. And this baby, this new life, it's possible partly because of the money James hid away for his children's future. You're sure? Gavin studied her face. I don't want you feeling obligated. I'm sure. James Gavin Rourke, a name that honors the past and the present, that connects this baby to all the family he has, living and gone. So James Gavin Rourke was welcomed into a household overflowing with love. Theo was surprisingly gentle with his new brother, showing a protective tenderness that made Marion's heart swell. Penny sang to him constantly, making up songs about every possible topic. And June, true to her gift with living things, could calm him when no one else could, humming wordless melodies that sent him right to sleep. The years that followed were full and rich. The school grew, eventually needing an addition to handle all the students. The ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the territory for its quality cattle and fair treatment of workers. More families moved into the area, drawn by opportunity and the reputation of a community that took care of its own. Theo grew into a fine young man, steady and reliable, taking on more and more responsibility for the ranch. He started courting the daughter of one of the neighboring ranchers when he was 18, a smart girl named Alice who could ride and shoot as well as any man. They married when he was 20, and Gavin built them a house on the far side of the property, keeping the family close but giving them independence. Penny's talent for art led her to Denver eventually, where she studied at a small art school and came back with skills that made her drawings into something approaching fine art. She opened a studio in town, painting portraits and landscapes, teaching children, making a living from her talent and her joy. June, quiet June, became exactly what Gavin had predicted, the best ranch hand any operation could ask for. She had an instinct for the land and animals that couldn't be taught, and by the time she was 16, she was managing most of the day-to-day operations with a competence that amazed everyone. She never married, never seemed interested in anything beyond the ranch and her family, content with her place in the world. Little James grew up surrounded by love and security, never knowing the fear his siblings had experienced. He was bright and curious, with his mother's determination and his father's steadiness. By the time he was 5, he was following Gavin everywhere, learning the ranch the same way Theo had, asking endless questions and soaking up knowledge like a sponge. Marcus stayed on, becoming as much a part of the family as anyone born into it. He never did find that bride he joked about, claiming he was too old and set in his ways, but he was Uncle Marcus to all the children and right hand to Gavin in all the ranch operations. The years were kind, overall. There were challenges, droughts and hard winters, market fluctuations and difficult seasons, the inevitable conflicts that came with any community, but they faced each challenge together, as a family, as a community, drawing strength from their connections and their shared history. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Gavin surprised Marion with a trip back to that first general store in town, the place where everything had started. It had changed over the years, new owners, fresh paint, modern shelves, but the bones of it were the same. "I remember standing right here," Gavin said, "and watching you walk in with those kids. You looked like you'd been through hell, but damned if you were going to lie down and die in it. I remember thinking you were either my salvation or another devil I'd have to survive," Marion replied. She took his hand. "I'm glad it was the first one. I'm glad you gave me the chance to be." He pulled her close, right there in the middle of the store, not caring who saw. 10 years married, 14 since we met, best years of my life. Mine too. And she meant it with her whole heart. They walked out of that store hand in hand, into the bright Wyoming sunshine, into a life they'd built from nothing but courage and stubbornness and love. Behind them was a past full of pain and loss. Ahead was a future still being written, still full of possibility. But in that moment, standing in the place where everything changed, Marion felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the stranger who'd seen a desperate woman and her children and said 4 simple words: "I'll take all of you." Those words had saved them, had become them, had transformed 5 broken individuals into a family, into something whole and strong and enduring. And as they walked back to the ranch that had become home, as the sun set gold over the mountains and the wind whispered through the grass, Marion knew with absolute certainty that they'd made it. They'd survived. They'd thrived. They'd built a life worth living, a family worth cherishing, a home worth defending. And that, in the end, was everything. The story that began in ashes had become a story of hope. The journey that started with loss had led to love. The family forged in fire had become unbreakable. And they lived, truly lived, every day forward from that moment when a rancher asked, "Are these all your children?" and received the answer that changed everything. Yes, all of them, and they always would be.